Welcome, everybody, to Flat Earth Nation Golden Age Past. After being deplatformed on that YouTube channel, it is now called Mudflood Was Armageddon because it is a Flat Earth Nation. The Golden Age is past, and Mudflood definitely, without a doubt, was the biblical Armageddon. Mudflood was Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. Are you smarter than a fifth grader? Are you a dissident? I believe that Alan Paco should now be called Paco the Dissident. And I'm on the page of dissidents in their Wikipedia. A dissident is a person who actively challenges an established political or religious system, doctrine, belief, policy, or institution. And it goes on to name some famous dissidents, of which, of all of those things, I qualify and hope you do too. But I want to go down to at the end of their Wikipedia page. It goes that this is under authority control of conformity. Conformity is the act of matching attitudes, beliefs, and behavior to group norms, politics, or being like minded. Norms are implicit, specific rules shared by a group of individuals that guide their interactions with others. Underneath it, there is a proscription. We'll look at there is damnatio memoriae, a modern Latin phrase meaning condemnation of memory, indicating that a person is to be excluded from official accounts depending on the extent it can be a case of historical negation. And I believe that's what they're trying to do to you. That's under dissident. They could exile you, primarily penal expulsion from one's native country. Homo saucier is a figure of Roman law, a person who is banned and might or might not be killed by anybody, but must not be sacrificed in a religious ritual. A non person, citizen, or member of a group who lacks, loses, or is forcibly denied social or legal status. Ostracism. Ostracism was an Athenian democratic procedure in which any citizen could be expelled from the city state of Athens for 10 years. While some instances, it's ostracism. Blacklisting, I think you know what blacklisting is, the action of a group or authority compiling a blacklist of people, countries, or other entities to be avoided or distrusted. Cancel culture, also known as call out culture, a phrase contemporary to the late 2010s and early 2020s, the time you're living in now. Cancel culture, censorship, deplatforming, also known as no platforming, has been defined as an attempt to boycott a group or individual through removing the platforms used to share information and idea, thus leaving you an outcast, rejected as from home or society, in some way excluded, looked down upon, or ignored, or an outlaw. Oops, I just wanted to read the outlines of these. An outlaw, like Robin Hood, in its original and legal meaning, is a person declared as outside the protection of the law. In pre modern societies, all legal protection was withdrawn from the criminal so that anyone was legally empowered to prosecute or kill them. Civil death is the loss of all or almost all civil rights by a person due to a conviction for a felony or due to an act by the government of a country that results in the loss of civil rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, no more for you people. It is usually inflicted upon persons convicted of crimes against the state. Vogelfrei is a German usage denotes the status of a person on whom a legal penalty of outlawry has been opposed. However, the original meaning of the term referred to independence, being, quote, free as a bird. Persona non grata, the status applied by a host country to foreign diplomats to remove the protection of diplomatic immunity from arrest and other types of persecution. A public enemy number one, term first widely used in the United States in the 1930s to describe individuals whose activities were seen as criminal and extremely damaging to society. An enemy of the people is a designation for the political or class opponents of the subgroup in power within a larger group. Enemy of the state, same thing, except now it's the state. Describing an individual in this way is sometimes a manifestation of political repression. Scapegoating, biblical term, practice of singling out a person or group for unmerited blame and consequent negative treatment. Shunning, an act of social rejection or emotional distance. In a religious context, shunning is a formal decision by a denomination or a congregation to cease interactions with an individual or group because they've been bad. Authoritarianism is the first in what is the governmental pressure political system characterized by the rejection of political plurality, the use of strong central power to preserve the political status quo, and reductions in the rule of law, separation of powers, and democratic voting. Nationalism is an idea and movement that holds that the nation should be congruent with the state. As a movement, nationalism tends to promote the interest of a particular nation, especially with the aim of gaining and maintaining the nation's sovereignty. There is left wing and there is right wing populism. It says left wing is nationalism and the right wing is popularism. Totalitarianism is a form of government and a political system that prohibits all opposition parties, outlaws individual and group opposition to the state, and its claims and exercises an extremely high, if not complete, degree of control and regulation over public and private life. Are you a dissident? Tyranny of the majority is an inherent weakness to majority rule, in which the majority of an electorate pursues exclusively its own objectives at the expense of those of the minority factions. Are you a part of any minority? Now, these are all studied and listed places that you can go on their Wikipedia to understand how much they fear dissidents, how much they fear people like you who listen to dissidents like myself. They have categorized the bandwagon effect. It is a tendency for people to adopt certain behaviors, styles, and attitudes simply because others are doing so. More specifically, it is a cognitive bias by which public opinion or behaviors can alter due to particular actions and beliefs rallying amongst the public. The brainwashing, the MK Ultra that has been used upon us by AI and everyone else, the concept that the human mind can be altered or controlled by certain psychological techniques. Brainwashing is said to reduce its subject's ability to think critically and independently, and they love brainwashing. Collectivism in society, a social organization, is a pattern of relationships between and among individuals and social groups. And you might have a social score someday that will allow you to buy and sell. Consensus reality is that which is generally agreed to be reality. Moon landing believers. Dogma are your rules. In a broad sense, is any belief held unquestionably and with undefended certainty. They usually consider the doctrines of the Bible to be dogma. Fear of missing out, FOMO, is the feeling of apprehension that one is either not in the know or missing out on information. Well, or that some of the information that you've been given is not true, is fear of missing out on the truth. FOMOT. What is groupthink? A psychological conditioning phenomenon that occurs within a group of people in which the desire for harmony or conformity in the group results in an irrational or dysfunctional decision making outcome. Groupthink wants you to believe that Jesus didn't exist and that zeitgeist movement has proven it can't be trusted. Hazing to belong to a crowd. Initiation refers to any activity expected of someone in joining or participating in a group that humiliates, degrades, or abuses or endangers them, regardless of the person's willingness to participate. The herd mentality. They have studied you. You've been studied. You need to maintain the confidence in your dissidence. Herd mentality, pack mentality describes how people can and are influenced by the majority through indoctrination. Look at all of those Bellamy salutes. You should Google Bellamy salutes. It's probably not in this list. Is the process of inculcating a person with ideas, attitudes, cognitive strategies, or professional methodologies. There's Pavlov's bell ringing for you if you want to believe wearing a mask actually helped. Invented tradition, probably your white witches, your warlocks, are cultural practices that are presented or perceived as tradition. Eugenics. Your country is number one. Memory conformity, also known as social contagion, refers to the phenomenon where memories or information reported by others influence an individual and is incorporated into the individual's memory. Milieu control describes tactics that control environment and human communication through the use of social peer pressure. Group language tactics may include dogma, protocols, innuendo, slang, and pronunciation. Mobbing means bullying by an individual by a group in any context. It's a peer pressure, peer group, workplace, neighborhood, community, or even online. And mobbing is mostly done by sock puppets and computers today. Normalization refers to social processes through which ideas and actions come to be seen as normal. Transsexual drag queen shows in kindergarten? That's being normalized right now. Normative social influence is the type of social influence that leads to conformity. Patriotism is right there in with this group, is the feeling of love, devotion, and sense of attachment to one's country. Very dangerous. Peer pressure, studied very much, is the direct or indirect influence on peers, i.e., members of social groups with similar interest, experience, or social statuses. Members of a peer group are more likely to influence a person's belief, values, and behavior. What is pluralistic ignorance? In social psychology, pluralistic ignorance occurs when people mistakenly believe that everyone else thinks that way, so I should too. They use propaganda. Look at that. The Germans at one time were beasts, raping women through culture. Destroy this mad brute. This looks like an English poster for the war. Propaganda is communication that is primarily used to influence or persuade an audience to further an agenda. Psychological issue, psychosocial approach looks at individuals in the context of the combined influence that psychological factors and the surrounding social environment have on their physical and mental wellness and their ability to function. They use the rally around the flag effect. It is a concept used in political science and international relations to explain increased short run popular support of a country's government or political leaders during periods of international crisis of war. Most recently used for the way they got, 50-year-old men ready to go to fight for Ukraine, which just years before was declared the most corrupt government in the world. But they were ready to rally around that flag because of the effects of the non dissident crowd. A social contagion, individuals' behavior. Let me move this. Social contagion. You know what a contagion is? It's like the germ theory. The phenomenon has been discussed by social scientists since the 1800s, spreading through a group or a network through peer pressures and things. They can use addiction, dopamine. Behavioral addiction is a form of addiction that involves a compulsion to engage in a rewarding non substance related behavior called a natural reward, probably the dopamine you get from your cell phone. Behavioral contagion is a form of social contagion that involves the spread of behavior through a group. It national crime contagion model predicted a positive relationship between neighborhood violent crime rates and the propensity of MTO participants to engage in violent crime. Hysterical contagion occurs when people in a group show signs of a physical problem or illness when in reality they are psychological. It could cause suicide. Defined Copycat suicide is defined as an emulation of another suicide that a person attempting suicide knows about either from social, wow, either from local knowledge or due to accounts or depictions of the original suicide on television and other media. Emotional contagion is a form of social contagion that involves the spontaneous spread of emotions and related behaviors. Wow. Social influence comprises the ways in which individuals adjust their behavior to meet the demands of a social environment. And eventually that's going to be tied to your money, and then you will be experiencing socialization. In society, socialization is the process of internalizing the norms and ideologies of society. The spiral of silence when things have been deplatformed is a political science and mass communication theory proposed by German political scientist Elizabeth Noel Newman. It states that an individual's perception of the distribution of public opinion influences that individual's willingness to express their own thoughts. The teasing can have a variety of effects depending on how it is used and its effect. When teasing is unwelcome, it may be regarded as harassment or mobbing. How about toxic positivity? Dysfunctional emotional management. Dysfunctional emotional management without the full acknowledgement of negative emotions, particularly anger and sadness, but they can give that to you. How about untouchability? This is the last in how they've studied group pressure. Untouchability is a form of social institution that legitimizes and enforces practices that are discriminatory, humiliating, and exclusionary and exploitive against people belonging to certain social groups. Could you imagine when they used to have white only and black only drinking fountains, if that became something like vaxxed only and unvaxxed only drinking fountains? Now, under individual pressures on how to achieve the enforcement, they can use the authoritarian personality. And that is a personality type characterized by a disposition to treat authority figures with unquestioning obedience and respect. Authoritarian leadership styles, exemplified when a leader dictates policies and procedures, decides what goals are to be achieved, and directs and controls all activities without any meaningful participation by the subordinates. That is, has a right wing authoritarian personality. I don't see a left wing one there. The right wing personality type that describes somebody who is highly submissive to authority figures. Control freak. It's a colloquialism. That means it's a local term. Control freak usually describes a person with an obsession with getting things done in a certain way. A control freak can become distressed when someone causes a deviation in the way they prefer to do things. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder, we've all heard about that, is a cluster C personality disorder marked by an excessive need for orderliness and neatness. Okay. Now, what have they studied about conformity? Compliance is a response, specifically a submission, made in reaction to a request. The request may be explicit or implicit, but you will comply, because to say, I will not comply, is not good for society. How about communal reinforcement? They don't want that. Communal reinforcement is a social phenomenon in which a concept or idea is repeatedly asserted in a community regardless of whether sufficient observable, its empirical evidence has been presented to support it. And then over time, people come to believe it. They like it when they enforce their ideas. They don't like it when dissidents gain traction. Counter signaling, a behavior where agents with the highest level of a given property invest less into proving it than individuals with a medium level of the same property. This concept is primarily for analyzing human behavior and thus relevant to signaling theory and economics. What is herd behavior? Well, it's the behavior of individuals in a group acting collectively without centralized direction. They've studied it, they can do it, they use it. Herd behavior occurs in animals in herds, packs, birds, flocks, fish, and so on, as well as human. Voting, demonstration, riot, general strikes, sporting events, and they can do it. Internalization. Uh, Come in. One. Had a little bit of an interruption there. I'm being, seeing if their key works in my door. Conformity, communal reinforcement. Let's go back to communal reinforcement is a social phenomenon in which a concept or idea is repeatedly asserted in a community regardless of whether sufficient empirical evidence has been presented to support it. A good example would be 9/11. Now, counter signaling is the behavior where agents with the highest level, okay, we did these herd behavior, we're into that. Internalization, an individual's acceptance of a set of norms and values through socialization. Everybody's prone to some form of internalization. Obedience in human behavior is a form of, open quote, social influence in which a person yields to explicit instructions or orders from an authority figure, close quote. Obedience is generally distinguished from compliance. Dissidents comply sometimes when they have to, which is compliance, which is behavior influenced by peers, and from conformity, which is behavior intended to match that of another group. Social proof, you need proof? Social proof is a psychological and social phenomenon wherein people copy the actions of others in an attempt to undertake behavior in a given situation. Okay. Now they list four experiments. I'm sure there are many more in their eugenic world of MK Ultra full-time experiments since probably as early as the 1920s. The Asch conformity experiments, a man named Solomon Asch, studying if and how individuals yielded to or defied a majority group and the effect of such influences. The breaching experiment, that seeks to examine people's reactions to violations of commonly accepted social rules and norms, most commonly associated with ethnomethodology. Hmm. Ethnomethodology. We might, could have looked that up, but, it's the method of ethnics, ethno. The Milgram experiment studied 40 men between the ages of 20 to 30 from Yale, another Yale, and I'm sure they learned something about it. Probably the ones where they were shocking people. I'm going to give you a shock if you lie. And some people would actually kill them for nonconformance if that's the same experiment. I'm thinking of the famous Stanford prison experiment that got people to realize that they will, if they're put in power, they will use that power. Now, anti-conformity, where we get the dissident. Dissident is an opinion, philosophy, or sentiment of non agreement or opposition to a prevailing idea or policy enforced under the authority of a government, political party, or other entity or individual. Then you are, like Paco, do re mi, a dissident. They have and use alternative media are media sources that differ from established or dominant types of media in terms of their conduct, content, production, and distribution. Sometimes the term independent media is used as a synonym, and many of those are government controlled, as if you've read the book 1984, are planned and used to help weed you out through metadata. Anti-authoritarianism is opposition to authoritarianism, which is defined as a form of social organization characterized by submission to authority, favoring complete obedience or subjection to authority as opposed to individual freedom. How about antisocial behavior? Is a behavior that is defined as the violation of the rights of others by committing a crime or even a thought crime, such as stealing or physical attack, in addition to other behaviors such as lying and manipulation. It's considered disruptive to others in society. Have you ever said, you're kind of antisocial? Auto segregation, self segregation, is the separation of a religious, ethnic, or racial group from other groups in a country. Flat Earth Nation Christians, This usually results in decreased social interactions between different ethnic, racial, or religious groups and can be classed as a form of social exclusion. Civil disobedience is well planned and studied. It is crafted, but if it is by true dissidence, is a active professed refusal of a citizen to obey certain laws, demands, orders, or commands of a government. Come on up. Come on. But lay down. Lay down. Come on. Come on. That's civil disobedience. All right, all right, all right. Alternative medias, no, no. Cosmopolitanism is the idea that all human beings are members of a single community. Its inheritance are known as cosmopolitan or cosmopolite. Cosmopolitanism is both prescriptive and aspirational, believing humans can and should be world citizens in a one world government or a universal community. How about supplying counterculture? Look at, counterculture used to be as like, I'm going to get a tattoo. Today, counterculture is described as a culture whose values and norms of differ behavior differ substantially from those of the mainstream society. It's not counterculture anymore to dye your hair blue. It's only as weird as it was in the beginning. It basically is somebody that's saying, I'm easy. That's the way I look at it. A countercultural movement expresses the ethos and aspiration of a specific population. And trying to fit in by getting a tattoo to be counterculture, it's not working in 2023. Culture jamming, look at that, is a form of protest used by many anti consumerist social movements, that's culture jamming, to disrupt or subvert media, culture, and its mainstream cultural institutions, including corporate advertising. The culture jamming it could be as some people going like, "Hey, I use Android because Apple uses slave labor like Android doesn't. We're all going to have to give up our cell phones sometime soon and realize it's only a tracking device." Deviance, Starfort prison system, social soci, sociology of deviance. Deviance explores the actions and or behaviors that violate social norms across formally enacted rules as well as informal violations of social norms. Although deviance, not dissidence, may have a negative connotation, the violation of social norms is not always a negative action. Some people play the devil's advocate. The is a former official position within the Roman Catholic Church, the promoter of the faith, one who argued against canonization of a candidate in order to uncover any character flaws or misrepresentation of the evidence. The devil's advocate. And then there is the dissident. It says a dissident is an opinion, philosophy, or sentiment of non agreement or opposition to a prevailing idea or policy enforced under the authority of a government, political party, or other entity in power. A dissenting person may be referred to as a dissenter. They're usually also considered eccentric. Eccentricity is an unusual or odd behavior on the part of an individual. The behavior would typically be perceived as unusual or unnecessary without being demonstrably maladaptive. Ethnocentricity is contrasted by what they call normal behavior, eclecticism. Eclectic means many different styles. Eclecticism is a conceptual approach that does not hold rigidly to a single paradigm or set of assumptions, but instead draws upon multiple theories, styles, or ideas. So, as opposed to me, where I only believe in the 66 books of the Bible, that it is the living Word of God, where other people can say, I find all religions equally wonderful. Hermit. You could be a hermit, a person who lives in seclusion. They could force you to become a hermit. Idiosyncrasy is an unusual feature of a person. It can also mean an odd habit. The term is often used to express eccentricity or peculiarity. Now, I'm under the form of anti-conformity. Individualism is the moral stance, political philosophy, ideology, and social outlook that emphasizes the intrinsic worth of the individual. Individualists promote the exercise of one's goals and desires to a value. They want them to value independence and self reliance, even in a communal aspect in my world. So, and there's rebellion. Oh boy, uprising or insurrection as a refusal of obedience or order. It refers to open resistance against the orders of an established authority. How about the red team? Are a group that plays the role of an enemy or competitor to provide security feedback from that perspective. Red teams are used in many fields, especially cybersecurity, airport security, law enforcement, the military, and intelligence agencies. How about satire? In a genre of the visual, literary, and performing arts, usually in the form of fiction and less frequently nonfiction, in which vices, follies, abuses, and shortcomings are held up to ridicule, often with the intent of shaming. And they do it because of shock value. Shock value is the potential of an image, text, or action or other form of communication, such as public execution or lynching, to provoke a reaction of sharp disgust, shock, anger, fear, or similar negative emotions. As far as the shock value, when the shock value of lynchings wore off, they realized people were into it. They studied something else. Now, you might have noticed I skipped over Pueblo clown, the jesters, the Bob, and the Pueblo clowns might have to have a show on their own, but they have been studied by many people, most exclusively or in depth by Conspiracies Are Us. And they were also known as sacred clowns, jesters or tricksters in the Kachina religion, which, they are part of the lost tribes of Israel, and that was part of their Kabbalah religion. It was, they left and studied foreign gods practiced by the Pueblo natives. You saw me there in 2019 or 2020 whenever I went there to tell them it's not really their land. They haven't really been there since the beginning of time. Pueblo clowns dressed in the black and white, just like jesters. The Hopi prophecies, you know, the clowns perform monthly rituals for cunning society and black magic. So It has been well thought out, and all of your dissension even has to be, considered that how much of it is planned. Or is there grassroots or astroturf dissension? Which one are you going to take place in? If you really believe in the Bible, you really don't trust NASA and trust the Bible, then you could be a true dissenter. If you're going to be someone that is a semi dissenter, you're going to be uh, like people who promote, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it could be. Now, I've got to go and participate in a class. So I'm signing off now. The dissenter, Paco Dissenter, telling you and reminding you that it is a flat earth nation. The golden age is past. Mudflood was Armageddon. And I'm never going to tell you anything else. Why would I? I'm trying to prove I have your best interest at heart. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho.